Hey everybody, greetings. Welcome to the May SILA Foundation webinar. If you were with us in April, we heard from 5 insurance commissioners on the top priorities at the NAIC for 2021. The commissioners shared that the NAIC is focusing on creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive climate in the insurance industry. This made us curious about the specifics, so today we'll be discussing the important work being done within the new NAIC Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Framework. I'm Cindy Davidson, the Education Trustee for SILA Foundation. Today we are delighted to be hearing from Evelyn Boswell, Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for the NAIC. Evelyn has been charged with leading diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts throughout the NAIC, including oversight of the newly formed DE&I Council. She also supports the efforts of the NAIC Special Committee on Race and Insurance. Evelyn will be sharing the goals, activities, and progress made so far in DE&I by one of our industry's leading standard-setting organizations, and I know you're going to be impressed. We have an hour, and although you're all on mute like usual, sorry about that, it keeps down the noise, we will take questions through the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on questions as they come in. Please let us know if you're having any technical difficulties. We'll try to help you out. Before we get going, I'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Agent Sync. SILA Foundation invites sponsorships to make programs like this available, so a round of virtual applause to Agent Sync. Thanks, we are grateful for the support. And now I'll turn the program over to Evelyn.
Hey, well, hello everyone, and it is a pleasure to be here. I'm appreciative of the invitation to share with you today what's happening at the NAIC. As Cindy mentioned, I'm the new Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the NAIC. And when I say new, as in first ever, so that is truly an honor for me. I've been with the NAIC now for 8 months. So you're going to get a little bit of, here's what we're starting at the NAIC. There are some things I'll share with you that we've completed, but a lot of it will be, we're starting because we're building our diversity, equity, and inclusion organization. So again, thank you for this opportunity. The first thing I want to ask is, where are you and your organization in this journey? So Mary Ellen is going to help me with a poll. And I just want to ask the audience members, are you beginning with your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at your organization? Or are you in the middle? Are you starting a journey and you're continuing to look for best practices to help you on your way? Or are you recognized in the industry as best practice? And we should be hearing a lot more from you. So if you would please just take about 10 seconds to answer this quick poll.
And if you'd like to see how the results are coming in, click on the polls as opposed to Q&A where we're chatting in Q&A, but go over to polls and you can see the responses.
And we've gotten a lot of responses, so thank you for participating with the question. So we see that about 74% of our audience today, Cindy, they have started and they are probably in the middle of their journey for DE&I, and they're continuing to look for best practices to help them along the way. So that's great. As you can tell by my introduction, the NAIC, we're just beginning our journey. And so we are in that 18%. So we're along with you. And then we have about 11% who are well into the journey and they're recognized with best practices in their history. So one, I'd like to know who you are so I can contact you later. But that's good to know for our audience participants, and I'll know who I'm talking with. So when we started 8 months ago and I came on board, I told Mike Considine, the CEO, and Andy Beal, the COO, that here are certain things that we have to have with our diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And so at the end of the day, I want our vision to be one that we want the talent pool to look like the country we serve. We first had the community we serve and then realized we serve the entire country. We have commissioners all over the country. We have the territories, we have DC. So we truly do need a talent pool at the NAIC that reflects our country. We want to partner with community organizations and universities that support underrepresented groups for career opportunities. So who are they? And let's find out who they are and marry up with them with their particular goals and objectives. We want to increase diverse representation at all levels of management. It is an honor for me to be here as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And historically speaking, the NAIC has been an organization for 150 years. I am the first person of color to sit on the senior leadership board. I am the first Black female to sit on the senior leadership board. So we do want to start ensuring that there is diverse representation throughout. So we have to look at our demographics and find out where are we at the NAIC when we talk about diverse representation, and then what is it we're going to do to address that. We want to minimize bias and inequality through awareness and education. So I hang my hat on education and awareness. Some people will say, well, Evelyn, that's kind of, beginner's manual, right? Certainly you would want people to be culturally proficient, but we cannot learn enough about each other. And I think the reports that we hear from news, the things that we saw last summer with our social justice protests, let us know that there are lots we don't know about each other. So we are starting at the NAIC with education and awareness. We want to ensure our company's guiding principles include the values we aspire to achieve. So we are looking at those guiding principles and making sure that we're lining up with those particular principles. And if we're not in alignment with the principles, what needs to change? Is it the strategy for DE&I or is it the principle itself? We want to assess and update current employment policies to reflect the future of the workplace experience. So we are taking a look at our recruiting policies, how it is that we are attaining candidates for our open positions. So we're taking a look at that and see what it is that we can adjust along the way. So with that want to list for our DE&I office, there's a way we have to get there. So we mapped out what those objectives would look like. If that's what we want, if that's the vision for ourselves, then in order to get there, how are we going to do that? So the first thing we did was create a blueprint for our goals. That blueprint we call the framework. And so that framework is what's identified in the second bullet here, the 4 pillars. In that framework, the first pillar is we're going to take a look at our workforce. I mentioned before in that want list, taking a look at representation, right? So who's in our workforce? Who do we need in our workforce? The second pillar is workplace. What community are we building? What's the environment like that we're building at the NAIC? We have 3 locations, Kansas City, New York, and DC. What's that environment like? Are we creating a community where diverse voices are heard? We also will be looking at the third pillar, our members. We are also an external facing service organization. So how are we supporting our members? And then the fourth pillar, community outreach, or our community. What are we doing, again, to help marry up with those organizations who are helping underrepresented groups in their communities to find equal opportunities, whether it's in employment, whether it's with their economical way of living? How can we help? And right now, because of COVID, in healthcare, how are we pairing up with people in the community to help them identify what it is their needs are? What's our role in that? So we're hoping with this particular framework that we start to build skill and competency as we're selecting people, as we're onboarding people, as we hope to retain a diverse work group, where all of this is in place so that we, one, capture attention. I realized I didn't know about the NAIC until about 9 months ago. And I think I shared with you, I've been with the NAIC 8 months. So what is it we need to share with our communities about who we are, what we're about, and what we're hoping to model. So with that, as I said, I hang my hat on education and awareness. So going forward, there should never be a time when we're not being aware and we're not learning. We're continuous learners. So each month we are learning something new, and that's my intention. So I shared this with the senior leaders at the NAIC. I tried to impress upon them that what we're about to go through is a long, long journey. So I think you've heard that before from a lot of other speakers when they're talking about diversity, that it's not a sprint. It's not. And in this visual, I even let the senior leaders know it's a windy road. It's not a straight shot from one starting point to the end point. We will probably take some dips, dives, we'll hit a pothole, we'll have to pull over to the side, rest a little bit, readjust, again, look at our values, look at our guiding principles, look at our objectives, see what we may need to adjust along the way. Our GPS will not say it's going to take us 5 years or it's going to take us 500 miles. We don't have a GPS like that. The GPS that's leading us is what's true for who we are. What's our culture? What can we implement that moves us a little bit further than where we were a year ago? And certainly that's going to be the barometer by which we're being measured. The initiatives that we're implementing, how well did they work? What was right about it? What was not so right about it? And how can we improve upon them? So, given all of that, we came up with a mission statement. It's very generic, but it's very simple too for people to remember. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a daily way of life at the NAIC. Now, is it today? No, but will we get there? Yes. So this is the mission that's driving us, that we hope to have DE&I in all that we do. There's not a time when we not think of how is this impacting diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I told you about the framework, and there are 4 pillars in our framework: workforce, workplace, members, and community outreach. This is what I'm sharing with our teams to help them understand the difference. And what I just announced this morning is that we want our associates to be intimately knowledgeable about these particular pillars. So we're going to take them month by month by month by month to explain and to go into further details. So starting in June, we will be discussing the workforce, where we're striving to attract, retain, develop, and promote diverse employees. So we will spend a month going through the organization, understanding what does this mean, what are the initiatives, what does this look like, and then how can they be involved. One of the questions that I've also put out is, who is responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion? One person said, oh, Evelyn, that's you. You're responsible. And another, the smartest person on the team, said, I think every associate at the NAIC is responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion. That person got a gold star, because it's not one person who could do this heavy lifting. And those of you who are in the business of trying to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion, you've probably realized you can't tackle it all. There is so much, and there is not one way to implement diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've seen the books, you've seen the articles, you've seen news stories, you've seen the TED Talks, the podcasts. Everyone has a vision, a way, a strategy of implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I like to share with people is to look at your culture. What can you support? What do your resources look like? And certainly, above all else, ensuring that your top leaders support diversity, equity, and inclusion wholeheartedly. So I am pleased to say I have that. It's an honor to work with Mike Considine and Andy Bill, knowing that they're fully supportive of what the initiatives are, what the strategy is, and how we're implementing at the NAIC. So if we look at the workforce, here's some of the initiatives I just wanted to share with the group as to what we're focusing on for the next 3 years. Our strategy is a 3-year strategy. So under workforce, we're looking at recruiting and the hiring process. Again, like I said, education awareness is where I hang my hat, and communication. So for recruiting and hiring process, we're hoping that we can go out, and meet people in real life versus virtually. But it has been a win for us, and that, I was hired virtually. But there's other ways in which we're looking to get our opportunities out there to communities that may not know about us. And so we're partnering with civic organizations and professional organizations. I even found a professional insurance fraternity that I'd like to connect with, that we've started connecting with and sharing our job openings with. So that's an avenue, but we're also looking at historically Black colleges and universities. We're looking at search firms that particularly focus on how to pull in qualified candidates from underrepresented groups. And then, of course, we're looking at our interviewing process in totality. As we look at education and awareness, where I hang my hat is that you've got to know what you don't know. And so we start with the basics. And so a part of the initiative for education and awareness is to first certify that 13-member council that I've been blessed to work with. Before I joined, the senior leaders put together a council that will help me with implementing the initiatives for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a 13-member council. And these people represent the 3 locations, New York, DC, and Kansas City, but they also represent different layers of tenure with the company and status or titles with the company. So they are volunteering their time to help promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to also communicate what it is. But before they could do that, I wanted to make sure that they understood the basics. What's diversity? What's equity? What's inclusion? What does it mean if someone says unconscious bias? Tell us about microaggressions. So what I did, I brought in a consultant to help the team understand what it means to be certified on the basic level of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about. So I'm happy to report mid-April, they finished their certification process. There were about 6 courses that I had consulted for the consultant to come in and to train the group on, and they did so, and they did a marvelous job. They were there every day, all the time. So it was about 12 hours of learning, in-depth learning about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So now the expectation is that when a division wants to have a book club, again, another part of education and awareness, or if they want to have a staff meeting, but discuss maybe a TED Talk about diversity, and they need someone to help facilitate the conversation, they feel credible that this team, this council can do that. So I'm pleased to announce that they are ready and willing to help promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have awareness campaigns. As I mentioned, it may seem simple to do that. You would every month put together an educational portion of your day to just explain what it means. And this month, as we're celebrating Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, there was an educational portion for all of our staff members to join in and learn about that culture. We've done this for every month. And so this month was fantastic. What we call it, you may call it a lunch and learn. We don't. We call it the NAICU exchange. Why? Because we want to have that exchange. We want to have the conversation go back and forth between staff and the council as to, here it is, what we're learning. Thank you for providing the panelists. Let's ask the panelists some questions about their culture. Let's get a better understanding as to how it impacts us in the insurance industry when we're talking about product or people paying more premiums than other people, and why is that? So we have this ongoing conversation each month, depending on what the theme is for the month. In April, it was autism awareness. And so we had a panel of those who are NAIC employees who deal with either autism themselves or have people in their family who are on the spectrum. So it gave an enlightened view as to how do we help people with special abilities join the workforce. So there's a lot of lenses to diversity. I know I'm not telling you anything new. It's more than just race, right? It's beyond what you can visibly see. So we don't skirt any subject that comes to our attention, and we're open to receiving other ideas as well from our staff. And communication, the last pillar under workforce, communication. As I mentioned, the NAIC exchange was established, and we do those monthly. There's a SharePoint site. When I was hired on, I asked our IT group to support me in placing a medium that will house all of our diversity, equity, and inclusion resources so that anyone could go out there and check out books or get recommendations for TED Talks or solicit articles. You can write an article, right? We told the staff they were writers. Feel free to write an article about their culture and feel free to share it on our SharePoint site. So it's new for the staff to use the SharePoint site, but we've got lots of information out there for them. They know that's where diversity, equity, and inclusion resources reside. And if they ever want a subject matter to bring to their department staff meetings, they know where to go right before staff meeting. They can pull it up and let's talk about it. So that's the workforce pillar. Under the, and I mentioned the certification, that screen that you see right there are just some of the classes that we took to ensure certification and to ensure that there was knowledge about unconscious bias or being authentic in the workplace. One of our goals is we tell our staff that we want you to be authentically you in the workplace. And so what does that look like? And how do people cover up in the workplace? How are they afraid of showing their authentic self? So we learned about that, having crucial conversations. We may even splinter off and have additional trainings about how to have critical conversations in the workplace. And then, do you see what I see? Again, intersectionality, how you could be multiple diverse indicators, which is female, African American for me, and I'm not telling you my age, but over 40, okay? So intersectionality and how does that play in the workforce? The LGBTQIA plus area of diversity, how do we ensure that there's inclusiveness? How do we ensure that we're listening? How do we ensure that we're minimizing bias? And then upping your game, we are interested in affinity groups. You may call them employee resource groups or business resource groups. We're interested in that. And so how do you do that? How do you start that? And for those of you who answered in the poll that you're well on your way in the diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, if you've started employee resource groups or affinity groups, please reach out to me. I'd like to have a conversation with you about how did that work for you? How does that work for you? We're just now learning about them as a whole. And I'm hoping by the end of the year, we'll have a couple of affinity groups at the NAIC. So under the workplace initiative, the DE&I annual conference, I wished I could invite all of you to our first DE&I annual conference. As I mentioned, I've been there 8 months. The council was convened right before I joined. So in June, we will have served as a council for 1 year. So with that, we're also going to have a conference in Kansas City. But because we're just starting, remember, we're just building our muscles in this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We want the council to be just for the NAIC staff. So we will have a full day of understanding unconscious bias, understanding the role of the council, and getting to know some of the commissioners that we've invited, particularly to be on our panels to discuss what they're doing in their states and to answer some other questions for us. And so it's going to be a great day in June. We're looking forward to it. But again, it's creating a community where, regardless of COVID, we will social distance, we'll wear our masks if that's required. But we're wanting to get together to understand each other a little bit better, understand what people do, How are they incorporating DE&I in their workspace now? And then what suggestions would we have for them going forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we're looking forward to that. And again, like I said, those are aspirational things that are listed: affinity groups, mentorship, sponsorship. I shared with you that we're looking at policy reviews. And of course, you can never forget metrics. So we want to ensure that we're not doing things just to be talking about doing things. We want to measure what we're doing. We want to be accountable for what we're doing and go from there, build upon that. And so, as I mentioned, the third pillar is our members. I can't talk about a lot about the Special Committee on Race and Insurance because I am part of the support staff. However, there is a Special Committee on Race and Insurance, and it's probably about a year old now. There have been recommendations. I support work stream 2, recommendations for that particular work stream in dealing with diversity in the workplace and what suggestions we could have for our members. And so we'll find out soon enough. We haven't yet made those recommendations public, but we'll find out soon enough what the members feel about our recommendations there. And then I'd like to ensure that as I'm meeting more and more people, that there's a way that we can share best practices. So that's part of bullet number 2 there under members is, what's everybody else doing? What went well for you? How did that go for you? Oh, what mistakes did you have? Share those with me so that I don't make the same mistakes. So we're getting to find out who's doing what. And I'd like to pull all of us together to ensure that we're not recreating a wheel, and we could possibly borrow. I'm good at borrowing. We could borrow best practice initiatives. And then lastly, our community. I mentioned that we're hoping to marry up with some or partner up with some other organizations that are looking to focus on marginalized communities and how can we help, whether it's closing the gap on the digital divide in certain communities, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's just understanding who's in a chamber of commerce and they're looking to transition their careers but don't know how. Maybe somehow we can help and support. So there's a subcommittee already from our council who's looking into that. And so I'm really excited to find out what work that they will be recommending when they're finished with their research. But these, again, are listings of some of the people we haven't yet signed a contract with them or we haven't yet partnered with them. We're researching how it is we can best partner with these particular entities. So I mentioned to you that we're looking at our recruiting and our hiring process. And we wanted to make sure that the hiring managers, and specifically, these are some new behaviors that we want you to start doing. So contact immediately talent management and the DE&I office when there's a job opening. Why? We want to be on the forefront. When you think you're ready to create a new job or backfill an old job, let's talk about what are your needs? What's the job description? Looking at that job description, is it up to date? And reviewing blind resumes. I don't know if any of you in the audience have looked at blind resumes as a way to minimize bias when hiring. We're not there yet. We don't have yet the systems in place, but that's been a suggestion for us to look at blind resumes. So we are looking at getting our technology up to speed to handle blind resumes. But for those of you who haven't heard of that yet, it's just redacting those things, those diverse indicators in a resume that could lead a hiring manager to believe someone is of one race, one gender, one age group, those kind of indicators to ensure that we're truly just looking at what's the job qualification, now who has the experience that meets what it is that we need for the job and go from there. So we want to try that. We want to see how that goes for us. And if any of you have done that, I'd like to hear from you to see what your perspective is on using blind resumes. Okay. We want people to volunteer for our recruiting process, our hiring process. So whether it's on a recruiting team, whether it's on a resume review team, or whether it's a hiring team, We'd like to have our staff employees, not just those who have the title of recruiter at the NAIC, go out to career fairs, but we'd like to have those on staff who have a passion for talking with people, sharing what the insurance industry is about, even talking with people who are still in school, had never considered the insurance industry as a viable career for them. We'd like for others to go out with us into the communities and share what it is that we do, and helping that way market so that they want to get the experience of what it is to hire, but also those who we meet will get an understanding of who we are in the flesh, what it is that we do, what our business is about, and maybe can direct people starting even at college age to look into risk management, look into studying finance before they graduate so that they could be viable candidates going forward. And then we've asked our staff, we know you know people, right? You know a lot of people, and a lot of people who are unlike yourself. So as you're out and you're with professional communities, or you're with your neighborhood communities, if you're with your alumni associations, share those with us. Give us the name and the number by which we can contact people to say, here's who we are, and here's how we'd like for you to help us to find out who are those smart people in your classrooms, who are those people in your community who truly want to be advocates for equity in insurance. So we're asking our staff to truly be actionable when it comes to recruiting and hiring. Education and awareness, part of this is that you've got to not sit on the side of the road, so to speak, when it comes to diversity and equity and inclusion. We need for you to be a part of the discussion. And so you need to know what it is that we're talking about. So we've asked all to attend our training classes. We try to make them at such a time period. Everything else isn't happening at the same time. So we look at our calendars to see what's happening in the industry and what meetings everyone has to be in attendance. And then we back up from there to say, okay, this 1 hour on a Thursday, I think we can make it. So let's make sure we provide training for as many as we can get on a call. And we have 495 people on our staff at the NAIC, and we've had up to 400 people, 450 people participating at any one time on a session. So we're happy about those particular exchanges. And again, there's always the opportunity. Remember, I said we're trying to create a community where we're listening to voices and sharing articles from cultures. Their cultures help us. So all the weight is not on the council itself. So we've had people to write about their faith, the way they celebrate their holidays, and we appreciate that. And we find that we can certainly insert an article, share it with the whole team on our SharePoint site. And then we've gotten a lot of hits from that way of communicating our culture. Model awareness. Again, those suggestions about how do you hear other voices sharing about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we make sure that people know that those resources are out there. And we're having fun too. I never thought I'd like to see myself in a recording, but I've had so many takes of trying to do a selfie and record myself on my own culture and how many times I flubbed that, and it's funny. And so I think I'm gonna just have to put the outtakes out there so that we can get a laugh at ourselves as to how we may sound to others as we're trying to express ourselves and be passionate about what it is that we love. And we know what we know about our own culture, but trying to explain it to somebody else, it gives me a smile because it's like, oh, do I really do that? Did I just say that we do that at Christmas time? And so it's fun to watch. We have a video of other staff members doing that. And so it's good to watch that and to learn from each other, to share with each other. And so we advocate for people to go out there and to do that, to make selfies and to have fun with it. Haven't yet gotten to a TikTok. I don't know how to do a TikTok, and maybe my son will do it for me, but that should be fun as well. And so here's the impressionable point, the last bullet here. And this is what I shared with our senior leaders. There shouldn't be a month that goes by from your staff agenda that something doesn't speak to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the onus isn't just on the senior leader, right? Or the person who's running the staff meeting. I've put the onus on us all. If you don't see a staff agenda that has diversity on it, be the person who goes out there, finds an article. There's something happening new all the time. And talking about it. Hey, did anyone hear about, and starting the conversation that way. Big conversations happened when we created our book club. And I would suggest and recommend a book club. It opened our eyes to a lot of those crucial conversations that I told you about. That's hard to share personally. However, when you have an author sharing it and bringing it up to the forefront, then you too can say, I felt that way, just didn't know how to put it in words. And I'm glad to have this trusting community where I can speak this and share it with you. And then see if anyone else shares the same value that you have just spoken to. So that's part of what we do when it comes to that first pillar of workforce. Recruiting, training staff, partnering. Cindy mentioned, Evelyn, share with us some of the accomplishments. So I will share with you that here's a timeline, sort of, kind of. It moves, it's flexible, it's fluid, and we're okay with that. But I have a quick story about evaluating job descriptions for bias. We said that, okay, when we're recruiting, talent management should make sure that the job descriptions are correct, right? Before talent management could even look at one particular job description, the hiring manager took a review of that job description and pointed out, it was an old job description, but pointed out the usage of the male gender terms throughout the job description. He should do this, he should be qualified here, he will be doing, those pronouns that are like just gender specific to males. And so it was a feather in our cap when the hiring manager saw this and said, hey, wait a minute, we need to change some things here. And so that to me resonated that, okay, they are hearing that there is a change in what we're about to do. They did hear that there's diversity, equity, and inclusion now in our recruiting structure. And I'm glad that hiring manager took it upon themselves to see it first and then to report it. So we're looking for those things to happen. We said it'd start in Q2. It's the second quarter. Actually, I believe that did start in the second quarter. So that time frame is fine. When you look at our training staff, diversity training, it did start for the council in the second quarter and finished up. The training for the rest of the organization, though, needs to happen. So how do I roll out what it is that I shared with the Diversity Council and they finished up in April? How do I share that now with 400 additional employees? And by way we going, it could be that some of us are still hybrid, meaning that you'll have virtual classes and some of us may be in person. So we got to figure that out before the third quarter, and we will. And we'll get this done before the end of the year. Let's see. Is there anything a part of our training that we're rolling out for diversity, equity, and inclusion for the NAIC that could also be used in regulatory training? So we're going to be talking with our education department about that. And so once they too are invited to the training for the rest of the organization, they'll have what it is that we've been sharing with the council and themselves and say, is there any portion of this that's good to mention with our regulators? And then, of course, onboarding. We had a class called Diversity Matters. When anyone hires on, they get this diversity class. And it's been in our organization for a couple of years. So it needs to be refreshed with the new information that we're sharing now with the council. And of course, partner with community organizations. That's difficult virtually. We've made phone calls. We've had people come in from the outside to speak with us virtually, and that's good. I do want to host and invest in the communities in which we are located. So I'm hoping that COVID will be a part of our history by the third quarter, and that we can get out and meet people where they are or invite them in where we are to share and sponsor certain events for them to bridge those collaborative relationships. So that's what's ongoing. That's on our calendar for the rest of this year and a couple of years out. The accomplishments, I'm glad to report, is that we do have a lunch and learn that's very right now. I can tell you the autism awareness NAICU exchange was very emotive. I turned off the camera just to wipe my eyes because of the sincerity by which we at the NAIC look to open our doors to more people with difficulties and special abilities. So our NAICU exchanges is just that. They're vulnerable opportunities for people to share. It was heartbreaking a couple of weeks ago to have a couple of our staff members to share how scared they were when they traveled for vacation and people yelled at them and told them to go back to China and take the virus with them. Those are the kinds of things that are being shared openly in our exchanges. And it helps to understand where your coworker is coming from and what they have to deal with as they're also trying to meet deadlines and get their work done, right? So those exchanges are powerful exchanges. We are appreciative of people externally who have come in to present with us. Some have been commissioners, some have been our NAIC officers, and some have been people you've probably seen on the news talk shows. But we're glad about those exchanges, and we call those a big win for ourselves, because then when you see others become vulnerable to sharing, pretty soon you get others who will say, you know, nothing negative happened when they shared. I'll share my story. And every story is important. So those are accomplishments for us, along with our, again, ITG involvement with our SharePoint site. We have what we call an in memoriam video that we started, and we want to do this every year. People who have impacted diversity, equity, and inclusion in our society who have passed on, and the legacy that they left, either by the impact of their death or the impact of their life's contributions to what we're doing now in our culture and how we're treating people. So that's a wonderful video. And then, of course, at the beginning of the year, we started and produced a year in review video just to show all of the great accomplishments won by the NAIC and our employees in this realm. So it wasn't really a year in review. It was like, what, 6 months in review? But we're so happy to have started it. And so again, at the beginning of 2022, we'll have another year in review video to show more accomplishments. We're adding and we're adding and we're adding, and this is part of our legacy. Education, I shared with you our awareness campaigns, the council certification, the monthly articles that we put out on our SharePoint site about culture. We also provided a digital calendar in Outlook. Hardly cost us a thing, but it's so easy to use. Some of you may be using this now, but you can, if you want, just include this digital diversity calendar that talks about things that are happening every day. So it took some of the weight off of the council having to go out and say, oh, today is Ramadan or the start of Ramadan, when you have a diversity calendar that pulls up and shows you, here's the announcement, here are the diverse cultural observances for today. And it does that every day. You can opt out if you like, but it's very interesting, and it gives you a backstory, and you can click on a link that tells you even more at a different website about that particular cultural event. And then we did announce a couple of weeks ago that we've added Juneteenth as a permanent holiday to the NAIC HR calendar. So it will be effective this month. No, not this month, it's May. It will be effective this year, June 19th. So since June 19th is a Saturday, June 18th, the office will be closed. And then starting again in 2022, it'll be a part of our calendar. So we just made this announcement. The Diversity Council did research. They provided a recommendation. The executive leaders reviewed the recommendation and agreed to it. So we are now having a Juneteenth holiday at the NAIC. In recognition of all that's gone on, when you look at what happened last year with the social justice protests, and you think about all of the other things that have come to light in recent months, it's how do we commemorate what's happening not just in the Black community, but this is as a part of our history. And then how do we bring unity and equity together in this space? And so this is the way that we've suggested that we do so, and it's now part of our calendar. And then for our community, we did provide during the winter holiday, we did provide to a few senior homes here in Kansas City and in DC and New York, hygiene products to help those seniors who were probably in positions of not having to buy for themselves because of COVID, couldn't get out. And the donations were just trickling in because of COVID. And so we sought those senior homes out and volunteered and donated on behalf of the NAIC, DE&I Council. So that's what we did so far for the community, but we're looking to do more in the coming months. You all, that's it. It's a lot, and there's a lot to lift there. And like I said, we're building. And you know, if you're building, sometimes there's not a structure to follow. And as I said at the beginning, we may have to pull off on the road, regroup, look at what we're doing and say, you know what, is this right for us? But right now, what we've been doing seems good for the NAIC. We're happy, we're pleased so far. We're starting metrics. So we're hoping to get fuller results next year after we've gotten a year under our belts. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you, Evelyn. Oh my gosh, that was so wonderful. We are at my company doing some work. We are way behind you guys. So well, I'm going to copy a whole bunch of your ideas. I hope you don't mind. I'm really I love the idea of the book club and the annual conference and the lunch and learns. I mean, that just kind of, and the Outlook calendar. I mean, how brilliant is that? Stops all those emails you get, right? And you know, I really, when I read through your slides the first time, was impressed with the community outreach. And I think a lot of organizations don't even think about that part, you know, just kind of very inwardly focused. So love all of that. I have a question. So how many, you mentioned 450 people attending. Is that about how many employees you're managing there?
No, we have 495 people
okay.
on our roster. And I think I'm going to go ahead and share it with you all. I don't think they were really coming for the training. They were probably saying, what is this new director up to, right? So that was probably the first one.
It's politics. The first one was politics. After that, that's so
it's Wayne Simpson. And we've had some good turnout, though. More than half will certainly come to the exchanges. And it depends on when we do schedule them, if there's a conflict. But we have up to 200, 250, 300 consistently for our NAICU exchanges.
That's so awesome. And then we had another question on measuring results and driving accountability. You know, how will you be measuring your success?
That's a good question, because I don't know. No, here's the bottom line. We have someone, and he's the director of our finance team, right? And he knows all about measures and metrics, and he wants to be the executive sponsor of it. And I want to give that to him. And I think it's great that someone other than myself will measure what it is that we're doing. And then we can I can certainly be accountable better for it. But for now, because we're getting started, it truly is. How many people showed up to the NAICU exchange? How many exchanges did you provide? Let's see. And so therefore, on average, how many people are attending? For our SharePoint site, how many clicks are you getting? How many people are reading the articles? How many thumbs ups are you getting? You know, it's small things like that. For retention or recruiting, of course, that's a different metric. It's how many people of a diverse background applied for your position? How many offers did you make? How many people of a diverse background did you hire? So
yeah, it would seem like recruiting and hiring would probably be the easiest place to measure. But I love the idea of the blind resume, having gone through some hiring processes during the pandemic. And I don't know if anyone else experienced this, but we did video statements, and I have to tell you, I hated them because it made it more visible rather than less. So you're watching a video statement from someone who says they want to come work for you, and now you know everything: gender, race,
Yes.
ethnicity, age. I mean, things that you wouldn't know from a resume. So I think it kind of made things worse in a way. And so I think that would be something I would love to go back to our HR team to try to fight intrinsic bias. Let's not make it harder,
Yes.
let's make it
Yes.
easier. Right. So this is just so incredible. I don't see any other
Cindy,
questions.
I did. I saw a
You
question.
do?
It was
Okay.
providing my email address, and I certainly will do that. Shame on me, I didn't say that up front. So I will give you that. And there was another. What is VRT? Oh, glad you asked. So VRT is our voluntary response team. I think that's what it stands for. You asked me about an acronym, and I've only been on the job 8 months, but
Good luck.
but I
Good luck
used it,
here at
right? I opened
NAIC.
myself
That's
up
all
to
they do is acronyms. They're all about the
Hey,
acronyms,
but
right?
it truly is a volunteer team that will go out and look for opportunities to share in the community. And so because they're already established, the DE&I Council wants to partner with our internal volunteer response team to do that and to add to the numbers, because you look around, there's so much need, and there's so much that can be done. And so we're looking to partner with them to find out what it is that they've done, but also from a diversity, equity, and inclusion point of view, what organizations are we helping to support, right? And all of us have biases. So are we only supporting people in a certain zip code, or are we supporting people who truly need us in a different area code of the city? So we're lending our lens for diversity, equity, and inclusion to them, and they're sharing with us those established opportunities they already have. So it's a good partnership. I can give my email address. It's Boswell, B as in baby, O, S as in Sam, WELL, Boswell at NAIC.org.
Thank you for sharing that. I never give out any IC emails unless I've got permission. And we do have a question on, can you share the name of the digital diversity calendar you're using?
Okay, so it was, yes, I can. It was Traliant that we were working with. They're the organization. So when you go out to Google, if you Google digital diversity calendar, it says diversity calendar. Hold on, I'm pulling this up right now as we talk. Diversity calendar. And so when you pull it up, I have the direct link. Is there a way, Cindy, I can send this to you so that it gets to everybody?
You know what? Yeah, send it to Mary Ellen and I. And when I tell everybody about, afterwards you're going to get a survey, we'll try to we'll insert it into maybe the
That'd be
email
great.
everybody gets. We'll get it out there to people. There is a question about whether the recording will be available, and yes, it will. So I'll do that when I do our ending commercial. I think we are actually pretty much ready for the ending commercial, because I don't see any other questions. So let me do my little spiel for the end, where I thank you, Evelyn, for spending time with us today on this important topic. I'm sure we all learned from you, got some ideas. I know I did. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted via a link on the SILA Foundation website, so you'll find it there pretty soon. Attendees, all of you will receive a post-webinar survey. So please fill that out. Provide candid feedback that will help us improve these programs going forward. Thanks again to Agent Sync for their generous sponsorship today. SILA Foundation provides these webinars free of charge as part of our mission and outreach. If you learned something of value today, please consider a personal or corporate donation to the foundation. We rely on sponsorships and donations to keep programs like these webinars going. If your company might be interested in sponsoring a future webinar, let me or Mary Ellen know. And speaking of future webinars, join us next month for an update from all 3 of the major testing services regarding remote testing for state insurance exams. It's on June 17th. Be there or be talked about. Thank you so much for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of your day.